Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we present to you the TEDx InternationalSchoolofUlaanbaatar event, The Next Generation, a Reimagined Future. TEDx is an independently organized event dedicated to bringing ideas worth spreading to our community. Today we have speakers gathered from all over Ulaanbaatar, ready to present their ideas and stories to you. So we hope you look forward to it. A special thank you to KFC Mongolia for sponsoring our event. To start us off, we have Tumen, who's going to present the power of laughter.
All right, can I ask you guys a question? Why is it a bad idea to eat a clock? Because it's time consuming and you always want seconds. All right, judging from my cheesy, jokey intro, I'm sure you guys can all guess that my speech will be about laughter, specifically about the powers of laughter. Now, before we get into this, I think I should talk a little about myself. Now, when I was little, I was a real curious little goober, alright? At the time I was into this whole astronomy phase, and just like every scholarly 7-year-old out there, I'd be asking them big questions like, oh my god, what are stars? Where are all the aliens? And, now I know that a star is a big ball of erupting gas and aliens may or may not exist. However, although my passion for astronomy died, kind of like Google Glass, my curiosity remained, unlike Google Glass. And to this day, I still nurture it. And until I got here to this day, it grew and grew, and it made me ask more of these thought-provoking questions. But I noticed a trend where I was always thinking about laughter. For example, why are all my friends with braces self-conscious about showing their teeth? Why are people concerned about the way their laughter sounds? And so, these questions and my curiosity gripped me, and it wouldn't let go. So I went on a quest to search for answers, and through a string of fate, here I am at this TEDx event today so that I may share with you all the discoveries I made. Now, laughter is an ancient thing. It comes from a faraway time, alright? It comes from a time so long ago that it predates written language. A time so long ago that it also predates vocal language. And so it's from this time when our humanish ancestors were only concerned about fending for themselves and not about, building gigantic concrete jungles. It was from this time that laughter developed out of a need for communication. Now, I'm not a historian. I can't tell you guys about all the, signs or whatever other methods people used to communicate, but I can tell you that laughter definitely came to be around this time, and there were a lot of speculations about exactly why this happened. Some say that it was a form of a courting call. Some believe that laughing originated as a show of dominance, or even just a signal to your other humans that you yourself are doing okay. And so, although we may never know the true origins of laughter, it's given us plenty of time for us people here today to try and dissect exactly what happens when we're laughing, and that's where we get to the good part. That's when we start discovering the powers of laughter. It's been, 200,000 years since then, a couple years, and, it's a long time really for us to really get into it. And coincidentally, 200,000 is also the number of texts my ex would send me every other day. But I'm joking. First and foremost, we can identify laughter as a social tool. We're more prone to laughing when people are around us. In fact, we're 30 times more likely to laugh when we are with just one person and more compared to just being by ourselves. And so, it's almost poetic that we are more inclined to laugh when we are with our fellow man, considering that's how it originated to begin with. However, it doesn't stop there, right? We're not just gathering together with other humans just so we can, make some hollow noise out of our throats. No. There's also something going on in our brains when we're laughing. According to the Indiana State University Sycamore Nursing Center, oh God, what a mouthful, they found that laughing increases our levels of dopamine and our human growth hormones. Now, these are very good things, right? They make you feel good. They provide cell reproduction. They support cell growth. And it's all these great things that's happening when we're laughing. You can't have too much of this stuff. It's great. And so that's one power of laughter. And now at this point, I may start to gather some doubters out there. Some people who believe that laughter can be used to make fun of others. Nah, that's wrong. Apparently, according to our boy Philip Glenn out west in Cambridge, he found that laughter is all-inclusive. When we're in a group laughing, our brains don't discriminate between, who's laughing first, who's laughing last, who laughed at who and started the whole thing. No. That doesn't matter. To us, at the end of the day, when we hear a group of people laughing, when we're in a group of people laughing, what matters is we are laughing. And I feel like that this is another great, almost superpower of laughter. It's the fact that it's all-inclusive. It doesn't discriminate. When it comes to laughing, there's no differences between race, sex, gender, social status. That's something we can't even say for most humans, but it applies to laughter, and that's special. Now, these are all positive emotions, right? It's all great, but that's only half of all human emotions. What about all the negative emotions out there? The other half. So what's so cool about laughter if it's only applicable half the time? Nah, laughter's also got you there. Laughter is also applicable when things are tough, alright? It acts as a stress reliever. It acts as a coping mechanism. Because you see, when we're doing that convulsing, writhing, bursting movement known as laughter, it's also releasing tension that's been built up. When we release our laughter, it also not only increases the good hormones in our body, it decreases harmful stress hormones such as cortisol or epinephrine. And so this is great, especially for people who are going through some really dramatic negative emotions. It's been found, according to researchers such as that of Keltner and Bonanno, that when we're laughing, especially if you're depressed or if you're a pregnant woman going through mood swings, these negative emotions are dispelled faster and it helps you get a hold of yourself quicker. And so that's another power of laughter. It helps us when we're feeling down and sad. And at the end of the day, isn't that all we want? To be happy? And so I shared with you all the powers of laughter today. And so when I laugh, I hope you all laugh with me. Thank you for having me today. Thank you for having me at this TEDx event.
Thank you, Tume. Next, we have Khaliun, talking about the difference between motivation and confidence.
It's all in your head is something we've heard countless times, especially us, that deal with anxiety and lack of confidence. The simple saying, it's all in your head, it tumbles us down. We are aware of it. We know it's our imagination. However, most of us, we don't have control over it. We let our imaginations run wild, forever imprisoning us in our negative thoughts. Throughout my early teen years, I developed social anxiety, but I was not aware of it back then. And it wasn't as if I woke up one day and suddenly withdrew myself. It subconsciously built inside me, eating me away. And as an emotionally vulnerable teen, I entered this long state of confusion and self-denial. My younger self used to think that maybe I was feeling under the weather and would push myself into socializing. However, neither the weather, the mood, nor the ambience around me mattered, because the fear of being asked a question in front of the whole class, the fear of having to feel that embarrassment, that surge of embarrassment, was still inside me. And despite my evident behavioral changes, no one seemed to notice the side of me. And that's because 1 in 5 of us have anxiety and go unnoticed. An estimated amount of 280 million adults have depression and anxiety, according to the NHS. This is only an estimate for adults. There are so many more out there, kids, teens, that have to deal with their intrusive thoughts alone. And the most common symptoms of anxiety are the constant need for reassurance, inability to focus, and lack of sleep. These were all my symptoms. And as these bunched up, my grades dropped. From sitting at the front of the class, I found myself at the back, the very back seat. And watching my classmates join MUNs, interactive groups, and athletics teams, it plummeted my ounce of confidence. Because I thought that if only I had enough motivation, I would be out there with them. But after many years of self-diagnosis, I came to a point in my life where I realized that it wasn't the fact that I lacked motivation, but that I did not have confidence. And in that very moment, I understood the golden rule of my life. Motivation is not a precedence to action. It's a result of action. Confidence is what drives you to be able to make a change. Confidence is what helps you to leave your fear behind. And this realization, it led me to my self-confidence journey. This journey was not an easy experience, but it was an experience that I would ever trade anything for. Because I learned to listen to myself, to learn about who I am, and most importantly, to accept myself as is. Fear and shame hovered around my youthful years for super long. But I've always had this urge, this eagerness to make a change, to help others. And with my new profound confidence that I've never had in my life, I needed to use it to its full extent, which led me to join an entrepreneurial competition with my peers. We proposed our idea of a new, friendly, educational environment. However, much to our dismay, we were not admitted into our next round. We were eliminated. But as young adolescents, bubbling with the eagerness to help, we stuck to our plan. A month after our rejection, we found ourselves 8 hours a week signing documents, legalizing papers, and contacting lawyers. Our hard work and dedication led us to finding our very own NGO, an NGO that aimed to get rid of the hierarchical gaps between students and teachers, an NGO that taught their students to find their own identity. We aim to do so by offering 6 different courses taught by students themselves. We believed that as teens, we all share the same experiences when it comes to school. And with this community of people that have the same experience, new learners, new students, entered this environment of safety. These learners entered this community of not being ashamed of their educational levels and being able to openly ask their teachers for help. And through this program, we got over 2,000 applicants nationwide and 300 students. With all that we were able to accomplish as a team, and with all that I overcome on my own, This thought still exists with me. What if I still had the same mentality as my younger self? What if I was still ashamed by my very own existence? What if I still hated myself? Where would I be? I definitely wouldn't be up here on stage, but rather, I hope that my 12-year-old self looks at me proudly and warmly embraces me for finding the confidence, gaining the motivation, in being a factor in making a change. Thank you.
Thank you, Khaliun. The next speaker is Anudari, who will be talking to us about balancing Mongolian and English.
If you understand what I'm saying right now, like right now as I speak these words, you're part of the 25% of the world who knows at least some English. And if English isn't your first language, then you're part of the 12.8% of the world who know English as their second language. For me, I'm part of that 12.8%. I have been studying at an international school for almost a decade. Ever since 3rd grade, I had foreign teachers, foreign friends, and foreign education. Almost every subject was taught in English, and the school had completely adopted the American system of education. Beginning from the alphabet to solving math problems were taught in English. Every topic, every discourse and communication was received and delivered in the foreign language. My past school was a Mongolian-based school. Most of the subjects were taught in Mongolian, and I was excelling at it. I was good at math, I was good at Mongolian, and I was good at almost every subject except English. Just something about learning English was hard for me. I just couldn't grasp the grammar, the sentence structure, the verbs, nouns, and grammars, and there were all kinds of rules and grammar that I was not familiar with. Summer came around and I had just graduated 2nd grade when my mom suggested that I should transfer to a new school to improve my English. She told me that learning English will tremendously help me in the future, and she told me that a person who knows English will find their way in life no matter what. I didn't really agree at first. Of course, as a 9-year-old, I wanted to be with my friends and classmates. The process of transferring to international school was something that completely shattered my idea of norm and education. The two schools had so much in contrast. Everyone was conversing in English, and I felt like an alien, so out of place. I felt like I was trying to throw a ball when all I knew was how to kick it. I tried to put together a few words with my broken English, but that took maximum effort. But like any human being does, I started to adapt. I improved my English. I started to get more comfortable holding a conversation in a foreign language. Slowly, I started to learn how to hold the ball. I got a tutor. I started speaking more in English with my friends, and gradually, throwing a ball was becoming much easier. English had taken its place in me as my second language. I consider myself a bilingual person. The formal definition of bilingual is a person who is fluent in 2 languages. So I'm fluent in both Mongolian and in English. I was pretty proud that I could speak in 2 different languages. So I thought I should put my knowledge into good use. So I volunteered in this organization in which I had to translate from English to Mongolian. So there were 2 girls speaking in English, and I had to write down what they were saying in English and write down the Mongolian translation right below it. Writing the English part was easy. It breezed by so quickly and I was finished within minutes. However, as I got to the Mongolian part, I got stuck. I stared into those English words and couldn't find the right word to describe what the girl exactly meant. I couldn't find the right word to use. It felt like my mind hit a blank wall and no appropriate words would come to my mind in Mongolian. Finally, after so much thinking, I could somewhat come up with a word similar to the original meaning. Then, I moved my fingers to type out the words, and I paused again. I didn't know how to spell those words. I realized that the more I developed my English skills, the more I was losing my Mongolian. I had learned to throw the ball so much and practiced it so much that I now forgot how to kick it. So then I wondered, Is this also happening to those around me too? Are people like me, who have learned English through most of their life, also experiencing the same problems I was facing with Mongolian? To test it out, I would ask my friends how to spell certain words in Mongolian, but their typical response was, I don't know. So we all brought our phones and relied on this translator tool to check for the correct spelling and word for our own native language, the very language we first uttered when we were babies. I would also speak with my classmates in Mongolian. Then I would notice the small but noticeable grammar mistakes they would make subconsciously. I realized that almost everyone around me was facing the same issue as me. So that was the case for my international school. But what about the rest of the Mongolian population? Were they facing the same problems as us too? It turns out Mongolia has been actively promoting making English the most prominent second language to replace Russian. Every child, regardless of where they live and where they study in Mongolia, receives at least 8 years of studying English. And it has been successful. According to World at Last, English is now replacing Russian as the most spoken foreign languages in Mongolia. English is now being taught at almost every school, both public and private. To make my research even more relatable and more in line with the context, I wanted to narrow my focus to the students of international schools in Ulaanbaatar. For me, as an individual, I didn't take my problem too seriously. I just thought that I needed to practice my Mongolian more, and all my problems will be fixed. But when I looked at all the problems will be fixed. But when I broadened my perspective and looked at the whole younger generation on scale, the problems started to take a much serious turn. By the pace of which English is spreading and being incorporated in our educational system, it is no doubt that if not now, English will be prevalent in almost the majority of all the students in Ulaanbaatar. When we take that into account and take a step back to see the broader image of the impact of English on a larger scale that relates to the majority of the student body in Ulaanbaatar, we realize that personal attrition of Mongolian affects the whole community. It was not just language being lost, it was the identity, the culture, and collective thought that was fading away. The attrition of the first language has long been researched and brought into discussion many years ago. Scientists have done so much research on the impact of second language on the fluency of the native language. There were hundreds of examples of case studies that had the similar circumstances and situations as us. And the results of these many case studies the researchers have conducted is that the efficiency of the first language fades away, but the capacity to learn and relearn the first language never stops. There are other studies that suggest that thinking in a second language dramatically changes your thought and decision-making process. Studies have found that you're more likely to make decisions with your heart when you're thinking in your first language and think more with your brain when you're thinking in your second language. A professor at the Boston University of Psychology found out that because we first learn our first language when we're little, when we first associated words with feelings and emotions, when we think and listen in our first languages, it triggers an emotional response, an emotional aversion. However, using a foreign language dampens that emotional reaction. So on a larger scale, we can assume that all the students of international schools in Mongolia are changing their thinking and decision-making process as they continue to develop their English. This can create a separation and disconnection or even hostility between generations. In the 21st century, most of the older generation in Mongolia speak Russian, while the younger generation speak English as their second language. And because of these differences of languages, there's differences of thought and decision-making process. A second language definitely has a strong effect on an individual. Identity, culture, language, and choices can all change when a person starts conversing and thinking more in their second language rather than their first. Of course, there are pros, like opportunities. Just like how I learned to throw the ball I could play games that I wouldn't have been able to play if I only knew how to kick it. But then there's also the cons, like attrition of our native language, the attrition on how to kick the ball. But when you hear it this way, it seems like there's only two sides to the circumstances. You either gain a language or you lose a language. But I didn't want to just focus on the black and white. I wanted to balance out the pros and cons and the use of first and second languages. The ball wouldn't just roll and it wouldn't just bounce. I had to find a way for the ball to do both. So I created this list for myself and for many others who are struggling to balance these two out. First and foremost is dividing which language to focus on for academics and casual. For me, as a student going to an international school, most of the subjects will be taught and delivered in English, so it is extremely difficult to attain the same amount and type of information in Mongolian in accordance to my studies. Thus, separating which language to use for which category is important. For example, focusing on your English when you want to focus on your academics, and focusing on your Mongolian for something casual, like talking with your friends and family, watching a movie in Mongolian, texting in Mongolian, learning Mongolian songs, or just incorporating Mongolian in your daily activities can make our brain get used to Mongolian and eventually form it as a habit. Second is continuously talking with people in the same language. This one is especially important when dealing with hardships expressing your thoughts in Mongolian to your friends and family. Slowly try to build back the thought process that happens when we start using our second language more than our first. For example, if there is something that you're happy about, then think your happy thoughts in Mongolian. And if creating a Mongolian narration in your head seems tough, then you may want to try reading Mongolian books. I know people say it very often, but they do have a reason for it. Reading Mongolian words in your head or out loud can get you re-familiar with the wording and familiar with the grammar again. Last but not least is transforming your thinking process into Mongolian. Transforming your thinking process is probably one of the most important steps in preserving your native language and keeping your Mongolian identity as an individual. Your thought process can directly influence your word choice and your actions. I struggle with Mongolian, and many others struggle with it too, and I'm sure many more will follow in the upcoming years. As Mongolia progresses, the abundance of students having troubles with their mother tongue creates serious issues from disconnection between generations to shift in thought and decisions. So it is vital for us, the future of Mongolia, to take small steps like these to create a well-balanced future. Like the analogy I have mentioned throughout my speech, the ball is yours. You don't have to just kick it or just throw it. You can do both. You can pursue both. And you can balance both. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech, Anudari. The next presenter is Battushig, who will be speaking about the future of cities.
What do you think the city of the future will look like? Try to imagine something from a sci-fi novel, something that screams the future, right? Something that's from the 22nd century, right? Do you think it looks something a bit like this? Or maybe this? Hopefully not this. But could the cities of the future actually look something like this? Now, I know what you're thinking inside. I know that you're thinking, how could this be the future of urban living, right? And in fact, that's what a lot of people think. And that's what a lot of people consider gear areas as. They think it's vestigial appendages, right? Stuck to our beautiful, progressive, modern downtown Ulaanbaatar. But today, I'm here to paint a much brighter picture, right? To give you a different perspective and to show you the beautiful potential of the gear areas of Ulaanbaatar and how they can impact the future of cities around the world. Now, before I move on, I would like to start a little history lesson. And I'm not going to bore you with details or dates. In fact, I'll just say this. Ulaanbaatar is, or was, possibly one of the very few mobile cities to ever exist. Now, during its early days, when it was called Ikhure, it was a nomadic city in every aspect. Entire residential districts, entire troop barracks, staples, storages, warehouses, marketplaces, shrines, and dozens of monasteries could all be dismantled, packed, and transported along with their citizens and their livestock to somewhere else totally new. Right? The city was so mobile and so flexible that it moved a total of 28 times before finally settling down here on the banks of the Tol River. This amazing level of mobility and flexibility was made only possible because the city was almost entirely comprised of gears of different shapes and sizes, and performing a myriad of different functions that a living, breathing city would need. Now, Ulaanbaatar's mobility saved us from numerous invasions. It took us to new pastures, to new resources, right? It helped us evade natural disasters. How many cities do you know of that used to exist or that still do that move around like this, right? It's almost something straight from a sci-fi novel or a movie. Now, unfortunately, as we modernize, we are starting to shed some of our cultural heritages and traditions behind. Like there's some sort of baggage holding us back from progress. And sadly, Mongolian gear is one of these cultural heritages that we no longer see the value of. But what's interesting to me is as more and more Mongolians decide no longer to live in gears and no longer see its value in today's world, more and more people around the world are actually becoming gear enthusiasts. There are companies and organizations in North America, in Europe, that buy gears from Mongolia, modify them, and resell them to buyers all around the world. There are companies also in America that make their own versions of gears, right? Modified to fit a certain lifestyle, to fit local climates. And I think this is happening because these people are understanding the value of gears and how they are more relevant today than ever before. Which very conveniently brings me to my next point. The world we live in today is a VUCA world. For those of you who don't know what VUCA means, it means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Now, we've all felt the effects of the 2020 pandemic, the economic downturns, the extended quarantines, right? It all was so extremely hard for us to handle, right? Not to mention all of the wildfires, the never-ending wildfires. Every time you turn on the news, it was some sort of wildfire somewhere, right? And the earthquakes and the floods, and the list goes on and on and on. This is what VUCA is. It's instability, it's unpredictability, right? So how do you prepare? How do you respond to this? How do you respond in the face of something that you have no idea of? Well, we can do this by being mobile and flexible, right? At least that's a start. Literally, by becoming modern nomads, we can start preparing for a future that is uncertain. That's something gear living and mobile cities can offer. Gears, the very things that us city dwellers discarded as primitive or bygone or as a symbolism of poverty in an urban setting, are actually the things that can bring us towards a brighter future, at least when it comes to cities. Right? It can offer us a mobile, more sustainable, and affordable way of living. And if you think about it, the gear is a capable and time-tested form of mobile shelter. Slowly but surely, it took its current form through thousands of years of innovation. Slow innovation. Yes, but innovation nonetheless. With a little more effort, hopefully, an eco-friendly housing solution for not just us, but for everyone around the world could be created. Now, this effort to take the next big step in mobile architecture isn't something that's a new phenomenon, right? It's been happening for many, many years. Many visionary designers and architects foresaw the benefit of a sustainable, decentralized mobile cities and off-the-grid living, right? They saw how these things can offer people a safer future, right? And how it can prepare us for something that we don't know. For example, in 1985, Pritzker Prize-winning architects Toyo Ito and Kazuyo Sejima, for those of you who don't know, Pritzker Prize is basically Nobel Prize for architecture. They designed something called the dwelling for the Tokyo nomad woman. It was a gear-like structure, and recently this design has been resurging. A lot of people have been talking about it because it's extremely relevant in today's quarantine and natural disaster context. Even an even older example can be seen from the 1930s, when an American inventor, architect, and futurist named Buckminster Fuller designed the Dymaxion house, right? A sustainable, autonomous, single-family housing structure that could be mass-produced, packed, and shipped throughout the world. Now, I think you would all agree with me here, to a certain extent, that in principle and in design, these two examples, to a certain extent, obviously, resemble the Mongolian gear, right? The gears that we have all around Mongolia and parts of Central Asia. And I'm also very proud to say that they're not the only ones doing this. There are many collaborative initiatives by locals and international organizations to bring the Mongolian gear into the 21st century and hopefully beyond. And these projects are trying to help find solutions to our problems of urbanization. One example is the Gear plugin, in which was designed and built by the Hong Kong University's award-winning studio Rural Urban Framework, in support from GearHub, the social enterprise that I work for. The Gear plugin fits the traditional gear with off-the-grid septic treatment, bathroom, water tank, shower, electricity, and passive heating. We've also recently worked with the University of Pennsylvania's Center for Environmental Building and Design to conduct research on the gear's thermal performance and efficiency. And we also wanted to create viable recommendations on how you could improve the Mongolian gear to make it more energy efficient and reduce pollution. But creating the next generation of urban living isn't something that only high-profile architects and designers or world-class institutions and organizations can do. That's something that we should all actively be involved in. As residents of Ulaanbaatar, now more than ever, we must and we can take active part in solving our own issues. We need to become part of the solution by becoming part of the effort. By doing so, we're not only finding solutions to our own city's problems, but we might find solutions to the problems faced by many other cities around the world. With everyone's combined effort, we can take the next big leap towards a sustainable, flexible, and mobile city that can always stay prepared for whatever the future might hold. Thank you.
That was wonderful, Battushig. Next, we have Enkhmaa, who's presenting about the demand for humane technology.
It's Sunday evening, and you've just finished binge-watching the recently trending TV series. You take a glance at the clock, and it's already way past your bedtime. And as you start to worry about all the missing deadlines on your desk, your phone chimes just in time to distract you from the agonizing anticipation of consequences. Your days are stuck in a cycle with technology sucking your time and attention faster than you can keep them. The average person in the United States spends about 4 hours and 30 minutes on their phone every single day. Per week, that is 31 hours and 30 minutes. But to give you an approximation of how long just that may be, it's actually equivalent to that of a full-time job in a week. But converting that, the person has spent 68 days of the year solely on their device. Almost 1/5 of our lives are dedicated only to staring at a screen and interacting on the minimum. Well, that is a significant amount of time, if you ask me. It's even crazy. Like, nowadays, smartphones have this feature that lets you track and see your own screen time. Some even give you weekly reports. I'm sure most of you have checked in on that occasionally, and you were pretty disappointed with the results, because how productive were you actually while on your phone or on your computer? Sometimes I myself even average 8 hours or more for screen time in a day, and it's devastating to feel like I'm wasting the majority of my life just like that. I could have read half a book in this time. I could have finished my laundry or even my assignment. Well, why do we keep coming back to our phones? We know it's wasting our time. But why do we find ourselves coming back? Why do we find ourselves coming back? Well, according to a survey called American Screen Time Habits by State, conducted by simple texting, boredom, curiosity, wanting to be informed, loneliness, necessity in work, health purposes are the main reasons why people access these platforms in the first place. It's apparent to see here and in real life that the meaningful usage of devices keeps decreasing. Sending pictures of ceilings or random objects to keep streaks alive on Snapchat, or dedicating long hours or sometimes even a whole day to take pictures of yourself, which then you can post maybe on Instagram or Facebook to get that boost of dopamine through like buttons, are just few examples of what I observe in my daily life. This specific degrading societal trend is influencing more and more people to form the habit of reaching for their phones when they're bored, when they have free time, when they're in the bathroom, they're going to sleep and waking up. Our devices are just there for the majority of our lives now. And the frequency of notifications and the information provided to us are increasing non-stop at an insane rate even. Well, I realized the significance of this problem when I first discovered this documentary called The Social Dilemma on Netflix. It came out in January of 2020, and I wish I had found out about it earlier. Or maybe it's just that I wished this discussion was raised earlier. Directed by Jeff Orlovsky, the documentary talks about how screen addiction and dependence, seemingly small things we don't usually take great attention to solving, actually leads to the bigger problems in life, starting with disinformation, hate speech, propaganda, political polarization, etc. It causes issues in every possible factor you may think of, whether it be social, political, environmental, you name it. It's a severe humanitarian problem. And Tristan Harris, American technology ethicist, who was a former Google employee, rose up to address this problem and act on it. He is now the president and co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology, and I'm very grateful for him having raised this discussion. And I want to share his, and soon to be the world's movement, today with you all. Well, then let's take a step back and think. The internet, mobile phones, laptops, desktops, TVs, why are they created in the first place? Well, I think that's pretty obvious, as they were created to make our lives easier, more convenient, and just generally more entertaining. I think we've experienced that side of technology already for some time now, and as many others will, I do admit that our lives have developed substantially with the help of these technologies. But mind you, their initial creation was actually for the purpose of the devices becoming tools. So how would you define a tool? Well, a lot of different sources define a tool in a lot of different aspects, but I would define a tool as something that can be used to our advantage. We benefit from using them, and the tools themselves will just remain as is. But looking back to the current problem, do you think that really is the case right now? Are we really using those devices to our advantage, or are they using us to their advantage? Okay, well then take this scenario. Imagine you're working on your homework, or maybe on a job project, and your phone is right next to you, and someone texts you, and you're tempted to pick up the phone. Maybe this is important. If I don't check the message, what if I miss out on something? These thoughts are constantly fluctuating in our subconscious mind, driving us crazy, so we pick up the phone and respond. After being interrupted, we have to return to what we were doing, right? You might think that you just pick up the phone and then reply and just get back to what you were doing. It sounds very fair and simple, but the cost of a distraction is much more weighty than we actually think it is, because it takes us 23 minutes and 15 seconds to fully regain the level of concentration that we once had before receiving that notification. Just think about how many times you get interrupted in a day by your phone, and multiply that by about 25 minutes. And even worse, society has already implemented into the minds of our parents, and generally everyone, that this addiction is solely because of poor willpower. Okay, society has made people think that we're lazy, unmotivated, and unwilling to move on to other things. Especially in Mongolia, parents are always saying things like, kids nowadays are always glued to their phones or computers. Okay, we always get yelled at, and we know it's bad, we have to stop, but we just can't win against technology. Hence, our short-lived entertainment we get is always met with constant guilt and stress. Well then, what if our so-called weak willpower was not the main factor to blame? What if we were all just taken advantage of? Have you ever thought about it in that way? Now, these companies are some of the richest corporations in the world. We often hear the names of their rich CEOs and how advanced their services are becoming. But we use their services for free. Not a single cent given from us for registering, logging in, and just being on the platform. So that's a bit weird. Where are these companies getting all their money from? They have to generate their revenue from somewhere, and it has to be from us, since we're the customers, and they make services for us, right? But some of you may already know, advertisements. The business models of companies like these are built on the extractive attention economy. The users, our attention is treated as some sort of a scarce and a finite resource, just like gold. When companies build their services around it, carefully adjusting and monitoring the amount of attention that we give them. And the system melts a design to keep our attention aligned with the platforms as much as possible, so that more and more ads can be kept being pushed into our minds. And it's probably and possibly the only way most effective way to get people to buy things right now. The longer we interact and pass by advertisements, the wealthier these companies get. Okay, well then the like button, scrolling through an infinite feed, swift sliding to move to chat or camera, or follow buttons present everywhere. Do these functions require effort from us? I don't think so. After a while of using the apps, these simple features almost get embedded into our consciousness that we can easily just recall. One tap this, one tap that. And sometimes software and app developers are truly fascinating, as they got us all hooked on these devices. And they're also very experienced psychologists too, it seems like. Our behavior and activity is relevantly observed all the time for the companies to make even more accurate recommendations, more effective manipulation, etc. Because sometimes even I myself is genuinely surprised when a video relating to a thing I was just talking about pops up on my YouTube feed. Like, that's crazy. And through constant observation and updates, they always find a way for us to dig the hole deeper and to make the problem worse. But what's ironic is that the technology developers and the corporations' former presidents themselves have fallen into their own creations and cannot see a way out. I'll give you an example. Tim Kendall. He's Facebook's former executive and Pinterest's former president and Moment's CEO. He has once said in an interview that he couldn't get off his phone no matter how hard he tried, despite bearing the responsibility of a father. Quoting him word to word, he said that, "God, this is classic irony. I'm going to work during the day to build something that then I'm falling prey to." Well, it's time we start building demand for humane technology. One where it does not exploit our time and attention. One where the softwares and algorithms are solely used as tools to suit the best of us, not the worst of us. Now, quoting from Tristan Harris, it's not about technology being the existential threat. It's actually about the technology's ability to bring out the worst in society, and the worst in society being the existential threat. So what exactly is humane technology? Well, you may recall that I've mentioned tools earlier in this talk. To put it simply, we just need to transform what we already and currently have into tools. Our human needs, whether it be meaningful communication, efficient access to valuable and valid information, and many others, should be met through the devices rather than our vulnerabilities be used for profit. It's technology that's designed to be socially responsible, providing benefits for its users and the society without causing the commonly observed negatives, such as the addiction, manipulation, dependence, outrage. The list goes on and on. Well then, do not disturb. Turn notifications off, content filter, bedtime reminder, hiding counts of likes, permission to track user activity, and more recently, iOS 15 has added a focus feature on iPhones that supposedly helps users concentrate and reduce distraction. And the movement may start with baby steps like this. At least the companies are recognizing that this is a problem and they're making small movements towards it. But you know what it's actually like? It's actually like saying plastic straws should be banned during the age of climate change. Such little tweaks are not enough. We need something with an overwhelming magnitude. We need something bigger and better. So the movement itself may be suggesting that there should be a complete system renewal in the technology ecosystem that we know today. We need to change the business models first, and then the design. We need to change the business model first, and then the goals, and then the design. Example 4 questions. You may answer them with yes or no in your mind. Do you mostly feel satisfied after you've used the platforms? Are you in full control of your psychology and behavior while using those platforms? Are you certain that your sensitive information, such as your credit card info or your home address, are stored safely? The majority, if not all, of the information on the internet, are they credible and true? When the answers become yes, we may have the assurance of concrete and collective development towards more ethical tech. And better tech will aid in solving every other problem that we have in our life. Can you imagine a future where instead of getting distracted and sidetracked, we actually have enhanced tools to help us concentrate in a superhuman way? Instead of being provided with information overload, we have the power to put our attention where we genuinely care about and where we exactly want to. Instead of being dependent for social validation, we have new systems that are just all about empowering and including. So generally, to solve a problem, you have to be 100% affirmative of your cause and reason. Hence, an alliance united for change. When citizens share stories and demand reform from those technology companies, and students organize and grow the movement. Educators teach about harms and solutions. Technologists work to redesign. Policymakers craft laws for accountability. Investors shift funding towards humane technology. But this is merely a rough outline for what should be up ahead for us, and we're only at the starting point. You know, raising awareness, calling to join the movement, waking up. So as an individual who belongs to Generation Z, I would love to see sophisticated, more ethical, and more humane technology incorporated into our lives for the next generation in our imagined future. Thank you.
Thank you, Enkhmaa, for sharing. Next up is Yesulen, who will tell us about the future of climate change and our role in it.
At age 6, I often questioned why the streets of my hometown, Uurtsaikh, were filled with dust and litter. I would apprehensively watch as my peers left their candy wrappers and empty soda cans on the soil of our neighborhood playground, but my childhood self shrugged the unease off, consumed with the intensity of tag or cops and robbers, and went about our day. At age 10, I learned that it was not okay to pollute your surroundings, that if your friends are littering, tell them not to, because the waste would last on our earth for up to thousands of years. I also noticed that each winter in UB, dark clouds of smog would veil the city, and the smell of burning coal would soak into your hair, your scarf, and your skin. I wondered why this was. But by age 14, I found the answer to my question. The air pollution, the excessive waste, the moral negligence of humanity were all contributing to a phenomenon called climate change. According to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate change is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere. Now, the majority of this human activity comes from the increased production of greenhouse gases due to the burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, industrial farming, and other processes. As the greenhouse gases such as CO2, methane, and nitrogen oxide are released into the air, they trap the heat from the sun in the Earth's atmosphere, thereby warming the planet and perpetuating climate change in a process known as the greenhouse effect. Now, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's 2021 assessment report, human influence has warmed the climate at a rate that is unprecedented in at least past 2,000 years. Researchers at the US Global Change Program say that the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere has increased more than 50% since the Industrial Revolution. This has corresponded to a 1.1 degree Celsius increase in the global average temperature in the past 200 years. But wait, you might be asking to yourself, 1.1 doesn't seem too bad in the past 200 years, but for something as big as our atmosphere, as our world, a single degree of warming kicks off a dangerous cycle of impacts. Intense floods and hurricanes sweep through countries such as Bangladesh and Vietnam, obliterating entire infrastructures and communities. Heat waves suffocate thousands of people and animals in countries such as France and Australia. Droughts breed hunger and conflict in developing countries such as India and Somalia as crop failures continue to rise. And now the Earth is facing a time of extreme extinction as up to 150 animal species go extinct every day. Under all this destruction, families are being forced to flee their homes as climate refugees. These are the ramifications of human-induced climate change. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that the IPCC's assessment report was nothing less than a code red for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening, and the evidence is irrefutable. He noted that the previously agreed upon 1.5 degree threshold was dangerously close to exceeding, and to prevent this threshold from being passed by at our glance, we need to step up our actions. We must pursue the most ambitious path. So what exactly is this most ambitious path? Humanity has been aware of human-induced climate change as early as the 18th century, when scientists first argued that human emissions of greenhouse gases could change the climate. But the first time that world leaders actually came together to make decisive actions against climate change was during the Paris Agreement, a legally binding international treaty on climate change that was adopted by 192 countries in 2015 to limit global warming to well below 2, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. Following this landmark agreement, public awareness regarding climate change substantially increased. Nowadays, people often want broad climate policies beyond the current state of play, according to a global survey organized by the UNDP. The majority of the survey's participants, which covered half the world's population, backed more renewable energy, they supported conserving forests and land, and they backed more use of clean electric cars and buses. Today, more than ever, we see youth being increasingly engaged in climate justice, from Greta Thunberg's school strike for climate protests to social media campaigns that are led by various student organizations around the world. It is clear that more and more people are actually stepping up to combat climate change, and we as individuals have adopted sustainable habits such as recycling, reducing, reusing our waste, commuting via public transport, limiting our electricity and water consumption, and many more. Aside from just being eco-friendly, these practices have allowed us to appreciate and protect the planet that we live on far better. But this isn't enough. The industrial nature of the world has significantly prohibited our ability to meet those requirements established during the Paris Agreement. Now, this is where we draw the line between micro and macro changes. Although it is important for us to disseminate knowledge regarding climate change to the public and for us to change our lifestyles to be more sustainable, the progress that we can make as individuals is incremental. According to the Carbon Majors report in 2017, just 100 companies have been the source of more than 70% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions since 1988. These multinational corporations, so-called carbon majors, derive their entire profitability from producing oil, coal, and natural gases for the world's energy-dependent societies. Now, fossil fuels account for about 84% of the world's primary energy consumption. So this means that no matter how much we try to reduce our electricity consumption or consume vegan products or spread awareness, without structural change in the way that we as humanity produce energy, the likelihood of us turning around the climate crisis to a net zero GHG emissions scenario is incredibly low. To quantify this extent of personal action, the International Energy Agency estimated that individual behavioral changes would only account for 4% of the necessary GHG reduction for a path to a net zero emissions energy system by 2050. To reach the requirements that we have put upon ourselves to keep our global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, personal action has to be paired with collective action and meaningful climate solutions. I believe that the way we as individuals engage with the conversation surrounding climate change should progress past just becoming more eco-friendly or even demanding the culpability of governments and corporations. For youth to be meaningfully engaged in the climate crisis, I believe that we should be educated about climate change not only as a socio-political issue, but also as a scientific one. So what are the alternatives here? Macro changes in the form of effective solutions for climate change. This includes the development and application of industrial innovation, renewable energy technologies, carbon removal techniques, and many more out-of-the-box solutions. Now, often the first climate change solutions that people can think of is renewable energy, and rightfully so. Currently, the biggest contributor to climate change is humanity's huge overdependence on the use of fossil fuels for energy. So achieving net zero emissions by 2050 will require nothing short of the complete transformation, the complete uprootal of the global energy system. Thus, renewable energy technologies that harness the virtually inexhaustible resources on Earth, such as sun, wind, and biomass, are the keys to reducing emissions in the electricity sector. But there are a few problems that need to be addressed with renewable energy. Firstly is the availability of power. Now, the biggest infrastructural problem with renewable energy is intermittency. This means that renewable energy sources cannot always consistently produce energy at all hours of the day, as they are affected by environmental cycles that can limit their use or efficiency. For example, wind power is only generated when it's windy, solar power is only generated when it's sunny. However, high-capacity batteries capable of storing large quantities of power solve the problem, as they store energy produced by wind turbines and solar panels, etc. during their peak efficiency cycles, and then they tap into those reserves when the cycles dip. And thus the development of electricity storage batteries will allow renewable energy to be less expensive and more efficient. This is just one solution. But secondly, is the unequal access to energy in global and local communities. Now, in the global supply chain, high-value resources such as oil, gas, and biofuels are sourced from less developed countries for the benefit of wealthier populations. Now, within the countries, national governments often prioritize linking only the wealthy and the middle-class communities to the electrical grid over poor or rural communities. In the Gir districts of my hometown, Uurtsaikh, for example, residents have no choice but to burn coal for heat just to stay alive during the coldest times of winter. This causes average air pollution levels to reach up to 27 times the level that the World Health Organization recommends as safe. This excessive air pollution is not only bad for the environment, but also causes respiratory diseases such as pneumonia and bronchitis, adversely affecting the poor who can't afford to be hospitalized or medicated when they're sick. However, introducing clean, free, and efficient renewable energy sources to poor or rural communities can make energy access more equitable. But we need more people investing in and advancing the renewable energy sector for it to be accessible enough for all people, regardless of their income, to reap their benefits. So then, what can we do? Firstly, we need to continue to have sustainable habits. Although looking at the climate crisis through a macro lens is important, we must not abandon our sense of responsibility when it comes to the climate crisis. Now, climate action starts from small things like recycling your paper, turning off your lights, using reusable straws even. But it grows into something beyond just you. It grows to the bigger scheme of things. Secondly, educate yourself about climate change through the resources that are available to the public. For example, if you're interested in learning about climate solutions through a more scientific perspective, there's a 12-course online climate education program provided by Climate Science Organization for free online. Other credible and accurate sources of information include reports and roadmaps published by organizations such as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, International Energy Agency, Carbon Market Watch, and many more credible sources. Thirdly, contact clubs or non-governmental organizations that focus on climate change solutions. You can do voluntary work in your community that tackles specific climate change or environmental degradation issues, such as pollution, for example. Now, by doing this, not only do you protect your local environment, your local community, but you gain a sense of belonging in the bigger picture of climate action. Fourthly, consider entering climate professions. An increasing number of colleges and universities around the world offer degrees that specifically focus on environmental and climate sciences. That doesn't mean you have to become a meteorologist or even an environmental scientist just to contribute to climate action. The reality is that climate change affects just about every area of our lives, from our ability to stay warm or cool to the food we eat. This means that you can break into a climate-conscious career in almost any path. You can be a sustainability consultant, an environmental lawyer, a sustainable fashion designer. The opportunities are essentially boundless. As we youth become more interested in sustainable development and climate action, calling for systemic change on the part of corporations and governments, the future of the climate crisis depends on how we act. I encourage you to think about what meaningful climate action means to you and how you can contribute to the future of the climate crisis. Thank you very much.
Yesulen, thank you for sharing. The next speaker will be Amara McCauley, who is speaking about being a third culture kid.
Hello, I'm a 10th grader at ISU, the International School of Ulaanbaatar, and I am a third culture kid. Now, while some people may know what a third culture kid is, I'm going to briefly explain what it is so that everyone is on the same page. It will also make the rest of my talk much more clear. A third culture kid, or TCK for short, is a person who grew up in multiple cultures which were not their own. So 3 or more different cultures equals a third culture kid. For me personally, I was born in Alaska, USA in 2006, moved to Norway in 2008 when I was 2, moved to Zimbabwe 2012 when I was 5, and moved lastly to Mongolia in 2019 when I was 13. There are many psychological benefits of growing up with your extended family that third culture kids do not get to the full extent. You get moral support from family members if you are processing a traumatic loss, going through a hard time in school, or even something as losing a family pet. You get childcare if your parents are busy or need a date night, which can be beneficial not only to the child but the parents' relationship with each other as well. You can learn life lessons from older generations, mistakes they've made, memories they have, and even historical events that they may have lived through. Spending holiday celebrations with family as a young child teaches them the importance of family and strengthens the bonds of family, as well as creates happy memory as a child, important for their confidence, self-esteem, and mental well-being as they are growing up. Having family members you trust while growing up is important if you need someone to confide in, if you are in trouble, or just need someone to talk to that you know will be there for you. All of these psychological benefits, moral support, childcare, life lessons, holiday memories, someone to confide in, third culture kids miss out on. For me personally, I lived my first 2 years in Alaska, and so while I did have extended family members living there with me, I cannot remember any of it, and therefore missed out on many of the benefits. I do not remember any of the family holidays, even though I am in the pictures. I do not remember my grandparents being there to babysit me, and I do not have any memories of my life in Alaska. Now, my life in Alaska was short, as when I was 2, I moved to Norway with the only 2 people I was related to by blood was my mom and my dad. I can only remember small parts of my life in Norway, small parts of my childhood there. I remember that my family came to visit during most holidays, and that I enjoyed them being there. I remember my mom and dad being loving and caring towards me, and that I was happy there. I had a good network of support in Norway, even though I left when I was 5. My parents made friends with people that they're still friends with, and we see every summer. We even bought land with them in Michigan a couple of years back. So while these people may not have been blood related, they seemed like family. They felt like my aunts and uncles, and people who I could trust no matter what, and they would support me no matter what. In Norway, I did have a family. Not blood related, but they gave me everything a family would. They would watch me if my parents couldn't. We spent holidays together if my family could not make it. And they would tell me memories of when they were a kid. And I would go to them if I was having a bad day and my parents were not around. They are still in my life to this day, and they are my family. This is common for third culture kids, making deep and connected relationships with others who you seemingly have nothing in common with, except for the fact that you both don't come from where you live. This is beneficial to third culture kids, because as they grow up, they are able to easily make connections with others, as well as being able to maintain relationships, even if they are not in the same country, let alone continent. I then moved to Zimbabwe when I was 5, and for the first couple of years, it was the same as Norway. My parents made strong friendships, and from that, I felt like I had a new family. However, this is the difficulty of being a third culture kid. People move a lot more frequently, and you lose relationships with many people. This happened to me not only with my friends, but with my new family as well. I felt like I kept losing people, and it made it harder to get emotionally attached, because I was scared that they would leave me, same as the others. I did not have that tight-knit family as I did in Norway. There were a couple of people that I felt as they were my family, but others I didn't even bother trying to get to know. They would just leave me. At that time, I felt as though I needed people who I knew wouldn't leave me, And so far, that was only my parents, up until 5th grade, when my dad left and moved to a different city to start a business. Half of my support system disappeared, and I was crushed. My parents swore that they would remain together, and that my dad would visit every weekend. However, it wasn't true. My parents separated when I was in 6th grade, and my dad came less and less. Having your family near when your parents have separated is important for the child's well-being. Wanda M. Williams-Owen, the Graduate Center, City University of New York, studied how children of divorce tend to blame themselves and how important it is to have family members to support them. I didn't have any family members during this time, and for a while I felt like I had no one to talk to, or even just someone who knew how I felt. I moved to Mongolia in 2019, and once again I felt as though I had no support system, no resemblance of family. But this time it was different. I was a lot older, and with years of being left by people I was close with, I no longer felt the need, nor did I, make the bonds like I did in Norway. My mom was alone, without my dad, and while she did make close contacts, I was at the age where I would rather hang out with my friends than hers. So I no longer had the support system I did when I was younger. I felt isolated and had trouble opening up to even my closest friends about what I was going through. But I managed to change this. I began weekly calls with my grandparents, sent photos and videos of my life to my dad, texted my cousin on Instagram, and began emailing one of my parents' friends from Norway, whom I consider my uncle. While COVID-19 may have affected the world in a way where it will never go back to the way it was, it also opened the world to a new way of communication that wasn't utilized as much as before. All of the new communication I now had with my family that I didn't have in Zimbabwe helped me feel connected with my family. My grandparents now tell me stories about them that I previously didn't know. They listen to me rant about classes and help me if I'm struggling. So if any third culture kids or anyone who lives away from home is struggling with connections or having someone to be close with, reach out to your family. Set up weekly Zoom calls, and through this, you can strengthen your family bond and slowly regain the benefits of having a close family and the family love and connection that was previously lacking. Thank you.
Thank you, Amara. Next, Namuundari will talk about success and its relationship with self-confidence.
In September of 2014, at 10 years old, while other kids were busy playing sports like basketball or volleyball, I enrolled in a course for a lesser-known sport, which I would then go on to devote 4 years of my life to. This is the story of what happened to me. My name is Namuundari. I'm a senior in high school, and when I was in 5th grade, my mom wanted me to be ahead of my peers in my studies, so she enrolled me in a memory training course, hoping I will learn to never forget anything I ever memorized. For any of you who don't know, the course basically teaches you memorization methods called mnemonic techniques, like the well-known memory palace, for instance, where you attach information to objects in an imaginary location in order to memorize things in a very short duration of time and remember it back like it's nothing. For instance, if you showed me a sequence of 40 random digits right now, like so, I could memorize it in a little under a minute and recite it back to you next week, but you probably wouldn't remember it by then. Back then, this course was something I would devote 2 days of my week to for like 2 months. I enjoyed it a lot though, as I learned how to do things I never even imagined I could do. But I soon discovered that this whole memorizing super fast thing went even deeper than a simple life hack. It was a niche sport that Mongolians were surprisingly good at. It was called memory sports. To give you an example, back then, the top 5 competitors at the recent 2014 World Memory Championships for ages 13 to 18 were all Mongolians. This means that this sport was actually something many people here devoted a lot of time and energy to. One thing led to another, and by that I mean my mom convinced me to become a memory athlete. And by spring of 2015, at just 11 years old, I was already entering my first competition, the 2015 Mongolian Memory Championships. I added a group photo with all the competitors here, and if you look a little closer, there's me. So here's a quick rundown of how the sport worked. I won't be going into detail or showing you many pictures because, well, it's a pretty boring sport to watch. It's not like basketball or soccer where everyone screams whenever someone scores. Instead, competitors wear these huge noise-canceling headphones that look silly if I'm being honest, like the one I'm wearing here at the 2017 Mongolian Memory Championships, and try not to make the slightest bit of sound. If you walked into a competition room right now, even your footsteps on the carpet would be considered loud. This is because athletes compete for 3 days straight, memorizing 10 different types of things, whether it be a deck of cards, random numbers, binary digits, random words, or even the names and faces of fictional people. These 10 different categories are called disciplines, and there are bronze, silver, and gold medals for each. So theoretically, one could earn 10 medals from just one competition alone, which I came close to doing on multiple occasions. This is because I picked up these mnemonic techniques really fast, meaning I became really good at these disciplines really quickly. This translated into a lot of medals and achievements, and the Kids National Champion Award at my very first competition. At the time, I thought it was a good thing, and in a way, it was. I became successful at a young age, since I was naturally good at the sport. At the same time, something incredibly dangerous was happening. My self-worth and confidence was becoming tied to my success and the attention I earned from my family, peers, and authority figures. You see, the more medals and achievements I earned, the more it was expected of me. And yet, I was convinced that I didn't need to work harder as I was already the best, right? This was a recipe for disaster because when, of course, those who were better than me showed up, I didn't really do anything about it. I just thought, hey, these people are just better than me, and went at an even slower pace than before. And as more and more athletes who were better than me emerged, the number of awards and medals I earned lessened. Eventually, something very important died: my passion. I had forgotten how amazing it felt to be good at memory sport without the promise of awards and recognition. I had forgotten how I became a better person thanks to the sport, more patient, more consistent, more adept at handling failures and stress, and of course, better at memorizing. I'd forgotten how lucky I was to be able to go abroad and with my team and have fun whilst competing with hundreds of international competitors, some of whom were considered masters and grandmasters at the sport. In the end, I came to associate the sport with towering standards that constantly needed to be met. This caused a lot of anxiety for me, and my mental health deteriorated. There's only so much a teenager can handle. At the same time, something else was happening, something that would save me. I was becoming increasingly interested in my school's debate club. The thought of doing research on various subjects and debating on them enticed me. Plus, I wanted to become better at public speaking so that I can voice my opinions more effectively. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to juggle both memory sports and debating. And because I was afraid of letting people down, I couldn't bring myself to quit the former. In addition, there was the prospect of getting into a prestigious college, with the friends telling me that I should just half-heartedly continue for the 3 years I had left, as I was 15 at the time, and use being an international athlete to my advantage on my application. I tried to follow their advice for a bit, but one day, the crushing weight of the unrealistic standards I had set for myself finally became too much to handle. I got up and told myself, "This isn't working. You're not happy. You need to end this chapter of your life," and confided in a fellow athlete who also wanted to quit. The two of us mustered up our courage, walked up to our coach, and told him everything. And that was it. The chains binding me disappeared. As soon as I quit, I joined my school's debate club, and the experience was completely different. For one thing, I wasn't immediately good at debating. I stuttered a lot, and my first speech was only 4 minutes out of the 8 minutes I needed to speak. This meant that I was going at the same pace as my peers and had to work equally hard to improve. Most importantly, it meant I had zero expectations to meet from the get-go, which was like a breath of fresh air. I could make as many mistakes as I wanted without fearing disappointment. My debate coach would just say, "It's all right, you can do better next time," as opposed to the words I used to tell myself before. You have to be the best or you're nobody. I'm currently entering my 3rd year of debating, and I'm much happier as instead of comparing myself to others, I'm solely focusing on my own progress. I'm debating for the sake of debating, not for success, not for recognition, not for college apps, but for myself. I'm truly passionate about debating, and I believe I will continue debating even when I'm in college. Despite everything, I will never regret becoming an athlete. This experience ultimately shaped me to become a wiser, braver person, and the memory techniques I learned still aid me to this day. Most importantly, I made lifelong friends who I've laughed and cried and grown with. I met a coach who I will always be thankful for, and who taught me that no matter what, I should always be kind. There's only one thing I regret. I wish I never based my self-confidence and self-worth on my success. To conclude, after numerous trials and errors, I discovered something I genuinely enjoyed and learned to appreciate myself for who I am, not what I accomplish. I want to end by asking everyone in the audience to think about the things they do and why they do them. I want everyone to reflect on whether they let achievements be the foundation of their self-worth. And if so, figure out what they should do next. Remember, self-confidence is the key to success, not the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you, Namuundari. Moving on, the next speaker will be Buyanjargal, who will be speaking about the lack of LGBTQ+ representation in Mongolia.
I remember when I was little, around 4 or 5 years old, I got my ears pierced. As a kid who dreamt of having my ears pierced, that day was one of the happiest days of my life. I remember waking up extremely early that morning, putting on my prettiest dress, and going to the salon. However, the whole process was not what I had pictured. The pain I felt made me burst into tears, and I just wanted to stop. When I said that I didn't want to get my other ear pierced, I remembered the exact words the lady told me very clearly till this day. She said, "You should get your other ear pierced. You don't want to look like a gay person, do you?" At that moment, in my mind, all I wondered was, what is gay? Is it something bad? A few years later, in elementary school, I was taught by my schoolmate that the word gay was a curse word. It was a word that referred to the outcasts, the weirdos, and the creeps of our society. And if someone calls you gay, you would be socially doomed. Learning about the LGBT community in such a way growing up, it shocked me when I first discovered that these people were really not much different than everyone else. They were just expressing themselves. They were just being proud of who they were. I personally was introduced to the LGBT when I first went to the United States in 2016 and saw all the beautiful rainbow flags adding color and beauty to the dull streets of San Francisco. Later on in middle school, I was privileged enough to learn what the community was actually about, but the LGBT in Mongolia are still very misunderstood. The ones that came out to the public are being beaten up, called by brutal slurs, harassed and discriminated against. During the Pride Days in Ulaanbaatar, the community faced more hate than support. Citizens made non-stop homophobic comments on social media platforms, and bus posters only saying "love is love" were torn down and thrown away. Such actions have made me realize that our country isn't the open-minded country that I once believed in, but it was also an extremely discriminatory one. I keep asking myself, why is this happening so often and so much in my country? We're a welcoming country when it comes to other races and nationalities, But why do we discriminate against other sexualities? A few years ago, when I went to the teacher's room at my school to ask about some homework, I overheard a conversation. Then this exact sentence caught my attention. A student from my class just came to me and said that they're gay. But it's just a phase though, isn't it? Kids do this when they're not receiving enough attention from their parents. The student's classroom teacher was telling other teachers in that room about their student's sexuality just like that. At that moment, my heart sank. Not only did the teacher break their students' trust, but they also had a huge misunderstanding about the LGBT. I, as an individual, as the friend of a queer, as the citizen of this country, don't want our future generation to continue on having these misunderstandings about the community. Misunderstandings and ignorant statements such as homosexual relationships are only about intercourse. Teens do this to get attention from their parents. It's just a phase. It's just a new trend, and Mongolia's population will no longer rise. Homophobia is an issue that affects all of us. If being homosexual or transsexual was a choice, why would anyone willingly choose a life that's harder? What we need right now is a movement for the community's safety. So I have an idea on how we could start that. We need to be loud about it. We need to be proud of who we are. The community need to constantly remind the citizens of this country that we and they are a part of this country and will always be. Marsha P. Johnson, a Black, queer, and trans activist, once said, "As long as gay people don't have their rights all across the globe, there is no reason for celebration." We need to start taking actions now, or else we, and also the future of Mongolia, will continue to live with an ignorant and misguided understanding of the community. I would like to end my speech here by putting a stake on the ground at TEDx, and I will continue to be a part of this expedition for equality. At the end of the day, though, no matter our race, gender, religion, nationality, or sexuality, love is love.
Buyanjargal, thank you. The next speaker is Saranzaya, and her speech is called TikToxic.
About 5 months ago, when the whole world felt like it was shut down, I started spending more and more time on TikTok. TikTok was a way for me and my friends to make up for the lost social connections. So throughout the day, we would all send each other relatable and funny videos, until it became our most used and loved app. I didn't realize it then, but I was addicted, and I couldn't go a day without it. TikTok has an endless stream of content, each video being about 15 to 60 seconds, 9 times shorter than Facebook's average. Therefore, the feed adapts faster. The app's algorithm is to personalize and use data from the user to always have videos they would like on their page. This is what makes the app highly addictive. TikTok's demographic is mostly teenagers. Teenagers are so vulnerable and liable to fake news and misinformation. According to Professor Sam Weinberg, who did a study on how vulnerable teenagers are to fake news, 80 to 90% of teenagers were unable to tell the difference between fake news and real news. Although at school, I was always taught to fact-check information, I never did that one on TikTok. I unconsciously believed everything I heard on the app. Now let's look at the ways TikTok gets users so addicted. First, TikTok has a distraction-free screen that can greatly increase user engagement. This works the same in surveys, productivity apps, and some social platforms. When you're on TikTok, it takes up the whole screen. Growth.design did a case study and saw a 280% increase in user engagement when they defaulted them to full screen. Secondly, habits equals dominoes. The most important action of TikTok that gets users hooked is their habit of forming this domino action. The more you swipe, the more likely you are to keep swiping. And you just have to swipe once to keep going and start a chain movement. The end goal is for you to form a habit and keep swiping without even thinking. Now third, TikTok detects your IP address to personalize your content based on what people around you like, even if you haven't explicitly shared your location. As you might have heard, TikTok has a horrible reputation when it comes to handling users' data. So the combined effects of not fact-checking and TikTok's psychological strategies resulted in my addictive and toxic relationship with the app. As I said before, my addiction started at a time when I couldn't see my friends, was getting loads of homework, and having more and more issues with my self-image. So at this time, I got a video dealing with anorexia and self-harm on my For You page. I was drawn to this content because it promised me I could lose a lot of weight following these tips. Losing weight seemed like a quick fix to all my insecurities, so I started listening to them. I thought that if I couldn't be the smartest, the happiest, the prettiest, I could at least be the skinniest. So I started listening to these videos and I let their ideals become my standards. There was too much going on in my life. COVID cases were rising and we were all unable to see each other. Therefore, I was getting more and more disconnected from everyone. At these times, I made TikTok and food my distraction. One thing led to another, and I had these videos romanticizing eating disorders flood my For You page. Soon, I started pushing away all my loved ones, even though physically I was surrounded with so many people. Mentally, I felt so lonely and sad. I kept all my emotions bottled up, and I felt like I couldn't tell anyone. But TikTok was my outlet. I could get distracted and not focus on the real world and my real problems for a few hours scrolling. The models of beauty presented on the app made me pressured to look a certain way and change myself. Seeing the same socially accepted and deemed pretty features just on different people makes me and most teens I know insecure. And there was a wide range of videos that I got recommended that led to me developing these thoughts about myself. First, I saw videos romanticizing, promoting, and normalizing eating disorders. These videos were mostly girls saying that they've only had iced coffee, that they only eat one meal a day, or that they forget to eat. These unhealthy behaviors on TikTok being presented as normal eating habits can be so dangerous. Most are promoting depriving your body of energy and nutrients, which can lead to many dangerous complications such as metabolic changes, slowed metabolism, the breakdown of your body's organs and muscles. I would call these videos undercover eating disorder videos because they don't seem that problematic at first glance, since they're usually over a funny sound or disguised as a relatable joke. Second, I had felt especially targeted when TikTok's algorithm suggested to me titles consisting primarily of how to lose that quarantine weight and how to lose weight as a teen. It was a trend and obsession over quarantine to lose weight and keep active at home. And although it started as a healthy and innocent act, it soon became very dangerous and a lot of people got obsessed. Everyone was sharing their transformations over quarantine. A lot of people wanted to completely change how they looked and become a new person coming out. This pushed out an idea that we had to lose weight gained over the holidays. This seemed like the healthy decision, so I was putting in extra effort to not eat as much and overly controlling my food intake. Bad habits can start so quickly, and I know this from personal experience. I found myself falling into a negative headspace surrounding food and how I looked. Now third was the trending videos under the hashtag what I eat in a day. These videos usually start off by showing a full-length body picture of the creator, followed by their proportions, calorie deficits, intermittent fasting, and with meals that look more like snacks. And of course, with viewers like me left feeling insecure about their eating habits. Hashtag what I eat in a day has over 8.7 billion views on TikTok as of October 2nd. This is an incredibly large number for a single trend that showcases several variations of eating habits, with a lot of them being dangerous. The National Health Services in the UK recommends around 2,000 calories a day for women and 2,500 for men. A lot of women following this trend were consuming half of their recommended servings, and videos like this had millions of views on them, promoting toxic eating habits as normal and healthy. On any given day or hour, you can find an alarming number of videos about food that lead into harmful dieting tips and trends, and they often glorify unhealthy eating habits. TikTok pushed eating disorder related videos, spreading these messages to users through their For You page. Now, although there is a small chance eating disorders are genetic, most of the time it's a learned behavior. So it's very dangerous how normalized it is. And due to TikTok's algorithm, there's an endless amount of content that can change your mindset and teach you how to have this horrible disorder. And as quarantine dragged on, TikTok's content increasingly focused on physical appearance, creating an obsession for the users to mirror. The content was just everywhere, subconsciously planting seeds in young viewers' mind that losing weight should be everyone's ultimate goal. A lot of hashtags such as thinspo, meanspo, fitspo became trending. These popular hashtags were banned, but a lot of users misspelled them to avoid shadow ban, and still use them with thousands of videos under them. TikTok has a feature of blocking videos, but not hashtags, so this stream of content continues to spread. The pro-anorexia community contained videos showing extreme calorie-restricted diet plans, personal stories or experiences, purging methods, diet tips, and users pairing up with each other to encourage each other to lose weight. And while I was researching for this talk, I asked my close friends what they thought about the topic, and surprisingly, they all knew exactly what kind of content I was talking about. And during the summer of 2021, during the quarantine, they all went through the exact same experience as me. Some didn't stop and don't want to stop this behavior, but they say that the reason that they do this is because of insecurities and the importance of beauty in today's society. And so a lot of teens take most of their tips and inspiration from TikToks. Teenagers are at a stage when peer pressure and social influence is a huge part of their lives, and it shapes who they become in the future. Eating disorders have a huge impact on the quality of a person's life. A lot of the time, people with eating disorders experience the most difficulties when their symptoms have progressed to a point that impairs their daily lives. The time spent controlling their food and exercising takes away the time they have to spend on other things like their social life, hobbies, and schoolwork. This disorder can break a lot of personal and professional relationships that took a lot of work to establish. Therefore, it is important for people with eating disorders to seek treatment upon becoming aware of the problem. Beauty depends on our own perceptions, and I want everyone to know that. There is no universally accepted definition of beauty. Every culture has their own. But every day, teens are filled with displays of ideal beauty. We forget that beauty standards are artificial and differ everywhere. TikTok lacks diversity and shows the same form or mold over and over again. For example, the top 3 most famous creators, Charli D'Amelio, Addison Rae, and Bella Poarch, for example, all have what TikTok deems as perfect features, like big eyes, small nose, and lighter skin without any blemishes. These creators have up to 124.4 million followers. They're pushed out to young girls as the standard that we're supposed to fulfill. It was found by Girl Guiding UK that 45% of 11 to 21-year-olds agreed that they have seen harmful images online that have made them insecure. From this number, 45% agree that it's because they don't look like them, 52% agree that it's because they all have the same bodies, 60% agree that it's because they feel pressured to look more like them, and 78% agree that it's because they all have the same perfect look. These figures are huge, taking into account that an individual's appearance does not influence their ability and intelligence or skill. However, beauty seems to be so important in young girls' lives and how they carry on with it. And social media apps like TikTok have a big influence on girls and women. It's no big surprise individuals are under increasing pressure to change themselves. People were even turning harmless content into inspiration for disordered eating. I would look at the top comments of any thin creator to see comments like, "I wasn't planning on eating it anyway," or "Okay, I'll put the chips down." Not only are these comments entirely necessary, but they spread the message that if someone appears to be thinner than you, that you should just stop eating, an idea that is unquestionably triggering. The basis of why beauty has become so important is a complicated one. A lot of young girls think that beauty defines their worth. TikTok feeds off of this insecurity, just like the beauty industry and the media. They feed upon young girls' insecurities to sell their products, get people addicted, and get money. Only an unreachable and overly sexualized version of beauty is presented in the media. To look or feel beautiful, you should not torture yourself with these beliefs. Spending your time and energy examining perfectionist beauty ideals is more harmful than beneficial. According to Linda Bacon, a PhD, dieting limits the happy chemicals in our brain, which can affect our mood, and the pursuit of weight loss is actually more damaging than high weight itself. So now that we've discussed the problem and the significance of the problem, let's look at the future. What can parents do? First, you need to know your child's username and follow them. Then you need to be very aware of the type of content they like and post. Secondly, you need to advise that anything they put out on the internet could come back and hurt their reputation. As a result, just let them understand the dangers of the app and also let them have fun as long as they're not hurting others. Remember, parents and guardians, prevention is crucial. Once you see content like this and learn these behaviors, it's very hard to quit. Now, for the teens with symptoms of eating disorders or have seen content like this, I strongly advise you to take your concerns very seriously. Eating disorders can be a very sensitive topic, but reaching out to a trusted adult or a professional is the first step to recovery. Discussing it with a professional will help you receive the right care, evaluation, diagnosis, and treatment plan. It's very hard and almost impossible to go through recovery alone, as it is a both medical and mental disorder. So please, if you are going through this, talk to someone. Now in conclusion, TikTok is addictive and dangerous, just like any other app, but it can be used safely. And anyone can addict it, not just teens. So follow people that spread positivity. Don't follow people that make you insecure. Make your account private and be very specific with who you follow and what videos you like. You should also try limiting your time on the app. Always support positive and be safe on the internet. Thank you.
Saranzaya, thank you. Enkhriilen is next, speaking about mental health.
7,897,044,450 people live on our planet. Wait, one more was just born. 2, 3, no, 4. You know where I'm going with this. From this growing number of people, 1% is 78 million. 1%. I don't even know the 1% of the 1%. In fact, Mongolia can't even make 1% of the population. We merely know at most 15 people personally, and I'm even stretching the number when I say 15. However, with knowing what can only be described as less than a crumb of the world's population, we fail to understand, accept, and respect one another. Why? Good morning, afternoon, evening to everybody. My name is Enkhriilen, and today I just simply want to say everything's okay. If not, everything will eventually be okay, because as we know it, it never goes as we plan. That all we could do is hope for the unknown to be brighter and easier than how things are now. Through this speech, I want to show you the importance of the smaller things in life, specifically the emotions we feel. Through what I'm about to say, you will see how emotions and surprisingly thoughts will build up to become mental health issues, ultimately answering majority of the world's biggest and fundamental issues. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. Martin Luther King Jr. Tonight in this election, you, the American people, reminded us that while our road has been long, while our journey has been hard, we have picked ourselves up. We have fought our way back, and we know in our hearts that for the United States of America, the best is yet to come. Barack Obama. During my lifetime, I have dedicated myself to this struggle of the African people. I have fought against the white domination, and I have fought against the black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all people live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to see realized. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. Nelson Mandela. Why were these speeches deemed the best speeches of all time? Why were they so impactful? How did they not only move people, but revolutionize society? When it comes to speeches and conversations, it is crucial that the audience and the listeners connect and understand what you are saying. With that being said, let's talk about the importance of time. Martin Luther King Jr., Barack Obama, Nelson Mandela made the most outstanding speeches of not only their time, but of history. Why? They made speeches for people that needed to hear all the reasons to have hope, to have faith, and that related to their struggle, that still had passion. For instance, Martin Luther King Jr. made his iconic speech during the Civil Rights Movement. Barack Obama's inspiring speech was his victory. Nelson Mandela's "I am prepared to die" speech was given in trial, speaking volumes for all the belief he shared with the world. The point I'm trying to make is that all 3 speeches had an audience that were in the same mental state as them, which is why time is so important when it comes to opening up. Just imagine if Barack Obama made a speech in the early 1900s. Would his speech still have the same amount of impact as it did during 2008? As the content of Martin Luther King Jr., Barack Obama, and Nelson Mandela's speeches spoke to the struggle of their audience, I believe it's pivotal that it's time we address the most basic yet important problem of all, our mental health. As you would imagine, everyone goes through a variety of emotions and states of mind throughout their day. So when conferences and speeches are talking about the future that we can't predict, or the success that one could make, or the possibilities of how you could be the best version of yourself, without the audience connecting and relating to what the person is presenting, no one could really understand the content of the speech at its fullest potential. You know, I had so many ideas for this TEDx speech. However, I realized everything I wanted to talk about was so off reality that when I took a step back to absorb all of the ideas I had, it literally felt like I was going to give a speech about a fairy tale. I obviously can't say anything that could relate to everybody at this very moment I'm giving this speech. However, I can say something that could help someone someday cope through feelings that they aren't sure how to deal with or do not understand of. But I assure you, it feels like nobody, no matter how smart or close or understanding they are, could truly appreciate your emotions. I want to know, as coincidentally I myself went through one of the most miserable, exhausting, and sad few months of my life. And as a teenager, I'm sure you could just jump to conclusions such as, oh, you're just going through a phase, or since I'm a girl, I'm on my period, something along that line. And let's be real. For a person to feel utterly sick and this terrible feeling in your gut, you don't necessarily have to be 16. It's fair to say that life throws you the most unexpected things at the most unexpected times. So whether you be 6, 16, or 60, we all go through countless emotions. So if we back up, let's say 5 to 6 months, I was going through this awful period in my life, right? But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't exactly put to words why I was feeling the way I was, only to realize that all the emotions were building up since my first misstep. Let's emphasize on the building up of emotions, because it's important to know why and how these issues come about, right? So I'll explain this further on in my speech. Let's go back to my miserable life. After a long, rocky road, I finally, and when I say I finally, it's actually getting worse, not better, so don't get your hopes up. I finally stumbled into this dark, deep, steep hole. And in this hole, I spent a good year climbing, then falling really hard. And eventually, I even started digging a deeper hole than before. During this time, so much had happened externally. And to be honest, my internal feelings were a complete mess as well. And when things are as worse as it is, it only goes downhill from there. I knew there were people who I could open up to, who I could trust, but I think I speak for a good portion of the audience when I say it only feels like you're hurting yourself more by opening up. This is exactly how I felt, and safe to say, I never really found that person who understood me. Although I did find a way to crawl out of that nightmare of a hole, but we'll save that for later. You'll find out soon enough. Now remember how I mentioned the building up of emotions, how it is crucial to understand where these flooded emotions come from. Well, on a more factual note, Harvard Health stated that at some point, nearly everyone encounters stressful life events, the death of a loved one, the loss of a job, an illness, or a relationship spiraling downwards. Some must cope through early loss of a parent, violence, or sexual abuse. While not everyone who faces these stresses develops a mood disorder, in fact, most do not. Stress plays an important role in depression, continuing on to state that stress has its own psychological consequences. It triggers a chain of chemical reactions and responses in the body. If the stress is long-lived, if it's short-lived, the body usually returns to normal. But when stress is chronic or the system gets stuck in overdrive, changes in the body and brain can be long-lasting. From this, the two endings stood out the most to me because it practically gives me all the answers I need from a scientific perspective. It shows from a valid and statistical point that I'm not totally insane for feeling the way I'm feeling. There was also a part that mentioned that it's a chain of chemical reactions and responses in the body and how one mental health issue plays a role for another. The word chain is really important to understand because people, including myself, tend to come to conclusions that stress, anxiety, depression all have to come from a recent huge event in life, which obviously could occur. However, in mental health, there are many factors, and one huge factor happens to be the building up of emotions, which people overlook and ignore because society and the world requires you to be strong, as it is a cruel world out there. However, this only creates a deeper problem. People need to really understand beyond their experiences and society standards. As stated in multiple sources, there is no single cause of depression. It can occur for a variety of reasons, and it has many different triggers. When I say understanding beyond one's experience, I don't mean you have to agree with everything the other person is saying. Just absorb what has been said. By shoving our feelings down just to appear strong for people we probably don't even care about is not idealistic, yet we still hide underneath this mask. Now, the mask is needed for a solid week or so. I mean, we are still the same creatures as before, right? But the mask has many representations, such as embarrassment, disappointment, anger, sadness, broken heart, frustration, you name it. But rather these representations being a reflection of what you're feeling, it is more so of what you're trying to avoid feeling or have people feel that towards you. For example, I was terrified, and I mean terrified, to open up about my anxiety and depression because I thought I would seem pathetic in front of my peers or disappoint my parents, or most importantly, I thought that people would judge me because I had privileges that others don't. This was what my mask represented. Shame for having emotion. Your mask might be completely different from mine, but nonetheless, we all have one. As you could see, everything I listed was to avoid people's judgment. I mean, who isn't, right? Though, why are we wired to fear from others' opinion when merely 99% of people have no clue of the events that take place in our life? Not only that, but mental health as a subject is also a huge problem. In fact, studies show that almost everywhere in the world, mental illnesses are taboo. A misunderstanding that is common is that mental health problems only constitute life issues. There are faulty mood regulations by the brain, genetic vulnerability, medications, and medical problems. As you could see, the things I just listed are all extremely serious. So why does society have such contradicting values and norms when it comes to mental health? Mongolia is a great illustration for this. Therapy, psychology, psychiatrists, and counselors are not something that is developed here. And having a mental health issue like anxiety and depression is certainly not a concern, because it is ideal to cope through it yourself. In many cases, Mongolian parents just seem to never accept that their children might have mental health issues. As I mentioned before, people fail to understand that everyone is going through certain types of emotions, no matter their age, status, or gender. So parents would conclude to stop using your phone, have you been watching too much TV, anything that is completely irrelevant to what the situation is. Now, as like any other situation, everything has its two sides. In a way, being straightforward towards hardships and looking at it from a simpler angle makes it easy for us to cope with, in cases such as mine where it wasn't severe enough to be an illness. However, overlooking something as important as mental health should not be an ideal. Without mental health, there would be no health.
So, with a little bit of statistics, research, and personal experience of living in society and simply just being alive, I honestly do not have a conclusion. Emotions and feelings are tailored to a person's life, and for me to conclude that you must cope this way or tell you how to feel would solely negate my speech. For the 15 minutes I have, it was my goal to inform, not change the opinions of my audience, especially because I know no matter what topic it is, but more so because my topic is what it is, being personal and untraditionally philosophical, a conclusion plainly does not work. It is important as human beings to accept one another, whether you understand each other's situation or not. It is crucial that we simply accept the versatility our world has. There are numerous topics that need to be discussed. However, when it comes down to it, mental health is the key to every problem. Because we refuse to agree, to understand, and most importantly, we live to satisfy others, only to never reach the fullest potential of anything. If every race and gender was accepted and respected, imagine if every problem was solved from both sides of the argument. Imagine if we realized that we are all just humans after every layer of life, achievements, stumbles, and backgrounds are off the table. This leads to the end of my experience with anxiety. Yes, I did try so hard to climb back out of the hole, which I dug, by the way, let's not forget about that. But I also did work my ass off to find my way back. Nothing changed within the time span of everything that happened. However, I tried to understand myself, and that is the key to my speech. If we allow ourselves, and solely ourselves, to focus on how we manage our feelings and thoughts, we will successfully and with ease achieve to understand not only ourselves but others, and in time entering our empire states of mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Enkhriilen.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Aadya Dixit, and I'm high school junior from Lucknow, India. And as I introduce myself here to you all, I had this sudden urge to introduce myself as the reason why other women hate me. Anyone remember that trend? It was all over Reels and TikTok. Introduce yourself as the reason why other women hate you. And the most common answers were, I'm sporty, I don't wear makeup, I talk with the boys. Or the ever common, I'm not like other girls. This right here is a classic example of internalized misogyny. And an interesting fact to notice here is that the majority of participants in this trend were Gen Z, a generation that prides itself in inclusivity. In my recent interaction with a professor of gender psychology, she shared with me her favorite anecdote to the question, why do we still need feminism? The tale goes like, a father and a son were traveling through a car. The car met an accident. The father died on spot. The son was taken to the hospital. When the son reached the hospital, the doctor refused to operate on the boy, saying that, he's my son, I cannot do it. And the question here is, if the boy's father died, who was this doctor? Why were they claiming that the boy was their son? What is the relationship between the doctor and the son? And answers throughout the years have ranged from maybe he had two gay dads, or a very hilarious one, actually. That one was the biological father, whereas the other one was the church clergy. Hilarious, right? So the thing is, while it may seem that, okay, this makes sense, the actual answer is pretty simple. The doctor was the boy's mother. And while many people stand there scratching their heads of why didn't I think of this before? The answer is that our internalized misogyny doesn't let us see women partaking in position and roles of power. It doesn't let us see women participating in roles that were traditionally done by a man. Women's rights are not a luxury that are given by the society. It is not something that needs to be earned. As Hillary Clinton said, and I quote, "Women's rights are human rights, and human rights are women's rights once and for all." This inequality, it only increases with time. Social conditioning is hell of a drug. We internalize things so seamlessly, things that are unacceptable. If a man comes off from a well-off family and goes into success, he's a genius who's carrying his family legacy forward. If a woman does so, she took the back door, she took the easy way. We have different vocabulary when it comes to defining a man and when it comes to defining a woman. This is not something which stops here. This is beyond the everyday level sexism that we face. This is something which is reinforced time and time again by institutions that claim to call themselves progressive. These are the institutions that, in order to fit women into their narrative, they stereotype the rules. And then they drag gender equality back by centuries, and then they dare to call themselves progressive. I come from a country where only 20% of all women participate in the workforce. Yes, you heard me right, only 20%. And being a child of a single mother, I grew up watching my mother work twice as hard as her male counterparts. From handling all the household chores and doing the work, to reaching office every day on time, to doing as many roles as she can for the same amount of pay, just so she is hard to replace, just so she is not seen as inconvenience. This is something which millions of women go through every day in the workplace. This summer, I was given the opportunity to be part of the Alpha Scholar research cohort, where I was given the chance to research about one of the UN SDGs. And as I dedicated myself to researching why are women not as likely as men to succeed in the workforce, these are the findings I came across. If you could divert your attention to my screen for a second, the map here depicts the state of maternity leave around the globe, ranging from 12 weeks in the United States unpaid to 120 days in Mongolia with 70% of pay, 26 weeks of fully paid maternity leave in my home country of India, and Russia with its 140 days of maternity leave. Maternity leave gives women the opportunity to have children as well as succeed in the workforce. It gives them job security. And not only that, it has been proven that maternity leave leads to lower infant mortality rate, increase in breastfeeding, better health for the mother and the child, and increased participation of women in labor force, and much more. And this is what makes maternity leave so crucial that we cannot afford to not have it. And there's just a travesty that countries like the United States of America still don't have provision for paid maternity leaves. If I could have your attention for another minute, the map on my screen now depicts the state of paternity leave around the world, ranging from 2 weeks of unpaid leave in the United States of America to Mongolia that only provides paternity leave to single fathers, to my home country of India that only has 15 days of paid paternity leave. This is something which is wrong. As you might have observed, there is a great disparity in the number of days given to a woman to the number of days given to a man. This is the issue with this policy. We are not giving men the opportunity to stay home and take care of their kids. Why? Because we see that caregiving is a woman's job. We are overburdening our mothers and undervaluing our fathers. We are completely neglecting the role of fathers in child rearing. Why are we so obsessed with the notion that caregiving needs to be a woman's job? Why? I dare to ask why, while we are all stuck in the same storm, We don't have the same boat. Why? This stereotypical policy right here is the heart of the current world's wage gap. This policy gives an unfair advantage to men. This policy is what creates the economic divide. This is what adds the additional cost when it comes to hiring a woman. And this is why companies all around the globe practice these traditions of giving preference to men. While considering for a promotion, when both the people have similar credentials, a man's worth is only till the part of what are his qualifications and what are his contribution. But when it comes to promoting a woman, the search goes way beyond. What is a personal relationship like? Is she planning to have a kid anytime soon? Is she married? Does she have kids? Is she going to be able to travel? We do not give women the choice to choose, make these choices for themselves. We assume, we don't let them succeed. And when it comes to employers, the only answer that comes is we have to pay the bills. This right here is why no country around the globe has been able to give women the same amount a man earns. For every dollar a man earns, no country in the world right now has been able to give women the same very amount. Countries like Rwanda, Iceland, and Hungary have taken initiatives, have introduced policies to have fair, inclusive policies such as paternity leave and shared parental leave. And these are the countries that have reached close to achieving parity. If by year 2030, we want to see gender equality as a success, we need to look within and beyond. We need to call out our own internalized misogyny and lobby for fair, inclusive, and just policies. Thank you.
Once again, a thank you to all the speakers who have taken the courage to share your ideas with all of us. And a special thank you to all the staff who put their hard efforts into making this possible, and KFC for sponsoring this event. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Please enjoy the rest of your evening.